Welcome, everyone. Hello. Hi, Tim.
Hey, how are you, BA?
I'm doing well tonight. I'm feeling very inspired by our work right now. I'm encouraged.
Yeah. Thanks for saying that. Me too. It's been um, therapeutic, shall I say? Just being able to dive into some of these original sources and just kind of pull some primary evidence that we could share with folks. I'm looking forward to talking about some of these issues with everybody.
Yeah, we've got an exciting night for everyone planned here. We want to tonight we're going to be talking about a number of different things here, which include the encampments at the universities right now and everything that's going on with them. And do you want to say more about? Do you want to say a little bit more about that, Tim?
Yeah, we've seen a lot of brutal crackdown and just a lot of um, just people having their freedom of expression, freedom of speech run over by university communities who feel threatened and are under a lot of pressure to maintain order. And what we're seeing is some really interesting things that we haven't seen in a long time in this country. And so there's a lot of backstory and some folks here tonight. Welcome if you're in the audience.
Yeah.
I guess I hear that my friend Diane is here, and just wanted to welcome her. And feel free to comment in the chat if you have any questions that come up. I think we could go over what's happening on campus. We've got a couple of guest speakers, and we've got some debates to look at, and some definitions to go over.
Yeah, we've got debate. Well, so what we're going to do is first we're going to, for folks, we're going to show some different sources about what's going on the campuses. And we're going to talk about from the river to the sea, and we're going to talk about we're going to share different examples, like for instance, Christiane Amanpour recently had on PBS one of the people who wrote the definition of anti-Semitism that's currently being used in Congress right now to try to criminalize protesters and discourage protesters. And he says, he's one of the authors of it, and he says that it's being weaponized. So we're going to look at that. We're going to look at some Muslim American folks, some stuff from Mehdi Hassan. There's some debates we want to look at. And we also want folks, if you're in the audience and you want to practice having a conversation on this show that might be difficult, we'd love to simulate some of those conversations and just play through them too. If you have a speech that you want to share, you can come on and try to share your speech as well. There's a lot of different ways that folks can show up for tonight. What else is there, Tim? Did I leave anything out? Or did we leave anything out?
Just some administrative review of some conditions. What do we call them?
Yeah, we've got measurements for purposeful harmony here tonight.
Yeah, we're harmony.
Yeah. And also, yeah, so we've got those. Let me pull those up.
Thank you.
And so these are different things that we're going to be using tonight to facilitate. And so if you have any objections to them, feel free to share it in the chat. But basically, just that we agree to co-facilitate a space where every idea gets its fair hearing.
We make sure everyone gets home safely with integrity.
To work together nonviolently.
Call each other in as much as possible.
Yeah. Do you want me to say a little bit more about that?
I think we should, yeah.
Yeah. So, right, like, Tim, can you like be mean to me or do something that like do something that like, you know, it's just a simulation. Like, can you say something mean to me?
Yeah, BA, when are you gonna get a haircut?
I could be like, screw you, Tim. That could be that's a call out. But I could also be like, Tim, tell me more about that. What's going on with you right now?
I know you to be a generous, kind friend, and when you say that, it is hurtful. And so, can you explain why you would say something like that? I think is another way to
Yeah,
put
right. Well, yeah. So yeah, like
it.
for instance, Tim. Like you can also do a call on too, which is like, Tim, you are so attentive and caring and considerate about all the possibilities of a way that a person might get hurt. And yet I was really surprised when I heard you say that I should get a haircut. I didn't know where that was coming from. Can you say more about that? That would also be a way.
Yeah, that's helpful
too. If you're in the audience right now, feel free to say hello, introduce yourself to us. Feel free to share what you notice in these as we read them. If you want to participate in the show, reading a section, practicing a conversation or whatever, let us know too. We'll invite you in. And if there's any questions about these agreements, feel free to share some too. So the next one is listen first and practice at noticing what others think. Listen first and practice at noticing what others think.
Avoid idea piling or try to leave some space for listening.
Yeah, right. And we could do a little example of that real quick. Do you want me to pretend like I'm getting lost in thought and maybe we could like dissect it a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, are you talking about trying to put the brakes on, like helping a friend from taking off with too much idea? Too many.
Yeah. Like here, I'll give you an example. Tim, here's the first thing. I think that we really need peace in the Middle East, and if we don't get it, it's going to be really bad, and I'm really afraid of that. And also, I think that we should do it today. And now, yeah. So, what are you noticing, Tim?
Oh, maybe you're a little nervous and you're running with a lot of ideas. That the use of and the conjunction and the adding to is kind of hard to keep up with. And I want to respond to the first thing you said.
Right. So like a different, like, so for instance, like what if I said, for instance, President Biden needs to get on the phone today and call Netanyahu and make him end this war. What do you notice?
You'd be giving everybody a chance to respond, or anybody else in the room some oxygen to breathe.
Yeah, and so as we take the microphone today, let's just remember that it can be really hard to hear each other if we don't have time to make sure we really did.
And the one at the top about every idea getting its fair hearing, I think that comes from when someone comes on and doesn't really want to have a discussion, but just wants to shut things down and filibuster the conversation. We might not tolerate that, or might not allow that to go on for too much longer, because we're wanting to call people into the conversation.
So. Yeah. There's I think there's this element of it that like we want to give every idea its fair hearing, but like a fair hearing's a fair hearing. It doesn't mean a person can dominate the whole conversation. On the other hand, we're all learning here, and so that's also why we want to offer each other grace. because we're all learning here. And fundamentally, this is a learning space. We do want some debate to go on here, but when we have debates here, we want people to choose to debate with each other. We don't want people to be forced to debate. I think that makes a big difference. Are there any questions or thoughts? Or Tim, do you think there's anything we might that folks might benefit from us illustrating or play acting a little more?
I wish I was better at it and could be more instructional, but just as a general rule, I feel like there's a lot of polarization in this country, and it sort of short circuits healthy debate, and we could all use more healthy conflict in the sense of practicing resolving our communication skills and our differences so that we can come together and form a more perfect union. But I feel like on purpose, our culture and society is divided and gaslit, and we end up into unhealthy conflict where things get stuck. We get stuck in one unhealthy emotion. So how do we get unstuck? And how do we regain a sense of positivity in a conflict where both parties to the conflict have a sense that we're of purpose, like we're getting somewhere and we're learning from each other, and we come out of it in a better place.
So what I'm hearing you say is that a lot of times our conflicts are very exhausting and painful and difficult, and we don't, but that we also want to try to come out through it with a kind of a win-win situation that's more positive and not so traumatizing, perhaps, and that actually creates generative behavior that builds the movement and connects us deeper, and as opposed to something that makes us feel more alienated.
Yeah, it should be like life affirming, and rather than alienating and just getting stuck. And I see Sharon Norman, I guess.
Yeah, Sharon, that's Sharon, and also Michael sometimes is on there too.
Okay.
And Sharon says, sorry, I missed some at the beginning. I was just about to say offering grace is such a beautiful bottom line.
Yeah.
If I've got to have a bottom line, I want it to be grace, right?
Yeah. So that was our agreements and how we might, learn together in a safe space where everybody gets home. We can help each other get home safely. And then do we want to go over the content tonight? Just a brief overview, or do we already do that? It seems like maybe we did that. Should we just jump in?
I think the last thing, I just want to share a couple of announcements real quick as we're getting started. So just so everyone knows, this coming Sunday, we're going to be having more human rights learning. You can join this event on meetup.com, and so I'm going to paste the link right in here. There'll be this event on Sunday. On Thursday, we're having an open code lab as well. So you can learn to practice coding, all kinds of things, whether it's a web form or a website or an app or a database. That's all right here. And whoops, let me see. Yep, there. And so, yeah, you can just the links are right there for anybody who wants them, and then also, this work that we do it. We only have one staff member. I'm not her, and I'm not them. And we do all this work, most of us voluntarily. And so you can visit our website at codewhatever.us. You can see testimonials from folks we've helped. And you can also donate on GoFundMe as well. It helps pay for our staff and helps all of us do this work. And aside from that, I'm trying to think of if there's any more announcements that we have. I think that's the announcements.
That was Sunday at what time?
Yeah, that's so Sunday at, thank you. Yeah, Sunday at 9:30 Central, 10:30 Eastern. And this is not a stream, it's just a Zoom session. And I think part of the beauty of this is that we also on the Sunday session can keep practicing, having practice conversations. So one of the things we'll be doing today is having practice conversations where folks can practice with a family member, with somebody who's like a family member or a friend, and where you might have to have a difficult conversation with them, but also try to make sure that you bring them along with you too. So, yeah.
Are you going to share your segment from Washington Journal? Because that could be an announcement.
Oh yeah, and let me just show. I'm just going to very briefly share with folks a little bit.
It does tie into the work.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you, Tim. Yeah, so I was on C-SPAN's Washington Journal the other day, and you can see this. This is not the official statement of Code Whatever, but this is me speaking. This isn't Code Whatever speaking, but I'm going to put the link in the chat. And by the way, I see Resist the Tweet has lots of beautiful Palestinian flags here. Thank you.
Welcome.
And so I'm going to play this. I'm going to play this clip. This was me on C-SPAN the other day. I'm going to play the start of this a little bit. We can watch the whole clip in a bit. But first, we're going to talk about the university encampments and whatnot. So I'm going to play a little bit of this so you all can get a sense of this, and then we'll play more of it later.
To BA in Chicago. Good morning. You're next.
Good morning. How are you doing today? Nice to be talking to you. Thank you. Glad to hear it. So I'm a Jewish American, and I support President Biden in withholding the funding. And here's why. If we look back at the 2006 Lebanon War, which on this very network, Daniel Pipes made many of the same arguments that are being made today about that war. And Dr. James Zogby argued against the war and said that we were digging ourselves into a deep hole and that we were doing more harm than good and that we're killing innocent civilians. And when we reflect, the BBC covered this very well. By 2016, the Hezbollah's numbers had risen in that war, or because of that war, from 1,000 at the start of the 2006 war to 10,000. And we're talking now about eradicating Hamas in this war, but really, when you look at it, we're actually possibly creating Hamas 2.0. And the other thing is that folks talk about the hostages and talk about the prisoners, and we need to be listening to the families who are saying that Netanyahu has blood on his hands, that the situation is not going to make hostages any safer or get any hostages home. The Palestinians' rights have been violated for years, and this is something that we need to think about as well, that there are many Palestinian hostages that are in extrajudicial situations that are being held by Israel illegally as well, including children that have been held for a very long time. So we need to bring all the hostages home. We need to guarantee, as has been talked about in the ceasefire agreements, an irreversible path towards real Palestinian sovereignty.
So I'm going to pause there for now, and we can explore this more later. But we wanted to bring this up because after we go into some of the first things that we explore, we want to share about, we want to explore that as well. Not that it represents Code Whatever, it represents my opinion, but I want to invite the community to be in dialogue with me about this. And for folks in the community, if you have something strategically that you want to present in the group or whatever, and you want to learn with folks, let's talk about that too. I notice Owen just got here. Hey, Owen, nice to see you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hey, Owen, thanks so much. So, so without further ado, should we jump right into it now?
Yeah. What do you want to start with? The definition or something from college campuses?
Yeah, maybe a little bit. So maybe what we should do is jump into, if we're going to do the definition segment, maybe let's go into the segment from, well, let's actually, the Democracy Now! Today was pretty good. Did you say we wanted to start with a clip from the very beginning of the Democracy Now! Segment?
The one with the Union Theological?
Yeah.
Yesterday, yeah, it was great.
We could jump into that, or actually, let's. I think I like this idea about starting with the Christian Amanpour clip. Should we begin with? Do we want to start with the one from 3:14 or 8:19? Do you think?
I think.
Or the 9:56 maybe.
Yeah, we could go with the simple 1 minute, 9:56, and then work our way backwards. Or
okay, cool. Yeah, I think, and we also so let's start with that, and
yeah, in the interest of time, it would probably be good.
No, I think that's a great point. So yeah, we're going to start with that, and then this is from PBS. Christian Amanpour's and company.
And he's a
yeah. Go ahead, Tim.
Just a little bit on Kenneth Stern, right? He's a leading author of the definition of anti-Semitism when it was a thing. Like, what was the organization he was with? International.
It's the International. I think, what is it? The Holocaust Memorial. Let's see. It's the definition of the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, and it's the definition of anti-Semitism that Congress is considering, but he's suggesting that it's being weaponized. And here's a link to the video from Christian Amanpour, and let's see. So let's and Owen shares a Palestinian flag and a fist and a heart too. Thank you. And as we go through this, feel free to share what you notice as we're going through this. But should we play this now a little?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Thanks.
Yeah, and feel free to share what you're noticing as we go.
That has to be protected. Part of the background to what we're seeing now was the push to outlaw Students for Justice in Palestine because of what they're saying. And I disagree with a lot of what they're saying, but I don't want them banned. DeSantis did that in Florida. Brandeis did that, not based on anything they did, just in terms of what they were saying. And so that's part of the reason why I think we're seeing some of the uptick now in the response, is that there's been a lack of clarity. We're not, we're going to support your right to say things that we find, offensive. We're going to use the assets of the institution to teach about it, but we're not going to suspend you or discipline you for things that you say.
What is the line? Because obviously some speech is already criminal conduct.
I want to stop it there for a second. So what did folks notice in this clip so far? What did folks notice in this clip? Feel free to share in the chat. And Tim and I will even share in a second what we notice, but we love to see you share it first. And if you want to, I can even replay the clip a little bit just for a second so folks can think about it again for just a sec. But yeah, what do you notice in this?
The chants and things disturbing. But if they're not being made as part of a threat, just a question of expression, that has to be protected. Part of the background to what we're seeing now was the push to outlaw Students for Justice in Palestine because of what they're saying. And I disagree with a lot of what they're saying, but I don't want them banned. DeSantis did that in Florida. Brandeis did that, not based on anything they did, just in terms of what they were saying. And so that's part of the reason why I think we're seeing some of the uptick now in the response, is that there's been a lack of clarity. We're not, we're going to support your right to say things that we find, offensive. We're going to use the assets of the institution to teach about it, but we're not going to suspend you or discipline you for things that you say.
What is the line? Because obviously some speech is already criminal conduct. If a person threatens to kill you, right? Makes a credible threat to kill somebody. You can be arrested for that. That's already a crime. So where do you feel like the universities have kind of gone off the rails?
Yeah, I mean, if somebody makes a specific threat to a person, I'm going to kill you, and it's a direct, immediate threat, that's obviously a problem. There was a case a number of years ago where in California, somebody found the names of everybody that sounded like an Asian Asian American student, and put out an email to all of them saying, I'm going to make it my mission in life to hunt you down and kill you or something. He got convicted appropriately so. But if I just stand up and say something deplorable about Zionist or Israelis or any group, that's nothing more than speech, that should be countered, but it shouldn't be disciplined. And that's what we're losing.
One of those.
Yeah. So what are folks noticing here? Oh, it's it's skipping for you. Oh, darn. Okay. Nice to see you too, Owen.
Thanks. Yeah, maybe you could try a different format, like Facebook or something.
That might be the case too.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're out and about or not, but yeah, thanks for coming by.
Good to see you too.
Yeah.
I'm just I like the distinction between hearing speech that makes you uncomfortable and how like it's better to counteract it, especially in a campus environment where you want to be debating the meanings and the arguments versus being disciplined for saying something that makes you uncomfortable or makes someone else uncomfortable. Which is, I think what I was hearing about that. It's like students should actually be protected for their freedom of speech on campus rather than disciplined.
Yeah. So I'm hearing you say that for you, the fact that students are being disciplined for their speech rather than engaged is a lost learning opportunity that should be happening at schools.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And who decides what's right or wrong to discipline? I mean, I guess, like, how do you measure that?
Well, yeah. How do you measure that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you remember what he said about, he was talking about, how it's different, if somebody says, I'm going to kill you, or like, for instance, the person who like looked up every Asian American at their school and like said they were going to kill them. That's very different.
Yeah.
Now, we also, there's some more clips in this that we could explore too. Should we go back to some of the earlier ones, or we also have? We've got a number of things here that we could explore. Should we go back to the earlier ones?
So what is it? The Union theology.
Yeah, should we pull up that just to give folks a setting of of what's going on? Let's pull
Well,
that up.
it's a nice contrast to
Yeah.
supporting the students as opposed to disciplining them and shutting them down with
Mhm.
brutal police intervention. And we've seen plenty of like what is abhorrent behavior and what we don't want to see, but it's a kind of refreshing contrast to find Reverend Dr. Serene Jones, who is Union Theological Seminary
Yeah.
College, is associated with Columbia and has been a refuge for Columbia students through all the legal troubles they've been having recently.
Yeah, I think this would be good. And I think you said, suggested that we start from the beginning.
Yeah, I think that because it's a nice sort of laying the foundation, giving some context of where they're coming from as an example, and then there's a question and answer that just should take a few minutes.
Perfect. Let's play this.
We can stop along the way and notice things. Yeah.
Funded by viewers like you. Please support our work at democracynow.org/give. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez. Among the leading demands of students protesting the war in Gaza across the United States for the past month have been calls for universities to disclose and divest from companies with ties to Israel. While many universities have sought to break the Gaza solidarity encampments by force, calling in police, suspending, expelling students over, it's believed about 3,000 students and faculty and allies have been arrested across the country. Other institutions have responded to calls for divestment. Among them is Union Theological Seminary here in New York, an ecumenical seminary affiliated with Columbia University. Last week, the union announced its board of trustees had endorsed a divestment plan from, quote, companies profiting from war in Palestine, Israel. In a statement they wrote, they have, quote, taken steps to identify all investments, both domestic and global, that support and profit from the present killing of innocent civilians in Palestine, whose numbers are now over 34,000, and a humanitarian crisis of ever-growing magnitude. Union's president, faculty, and students have repeatedly made strong public calls for an immediate ceasefire and will continue to do so until this continually escalating war has stopped. These calls are supported by today's decision by Union's investment committees to withdraw support from companies profiting from the war, end quote.
So what are folks noticing so far here? Yeah, what are, oh, I see Sharon says, oh, this is from the previous segment, but this is good. She says, I think what Congress is doing about protecting anti-Semitism by quashing speech is a dangerous, slippery slope. They know it, and we need to take another tack. So, yeah, thank you, Sharon.
Wondering what other tack would be a good alternative.
Yeah, I'd heard you mention before, Tim, just about the engagement that the universities need. You know, like for instance, I'll just share a personal experience around this. As an educator, I'm very passionate about this issue, and as a Jewish person too. I think it's really important that we look at these issues. Because there's people, when we talk about give every idea its fair hearing, we need to be thinking about how we can listen to each other, how we can tune into each other, and how we can connect. And in this time, when you're in school, you're trying to try on ideas to find out which ideas fit you as a person, what ideas you actually think, what you believe. I do think that when I was in school, it was very hard for me to actually have that kind of experience. And this is only making it harder. what else do folks notice from this segment, or should we play a little bit more?
I hear you saying that students ought to be in an environment that supports people testing out ideas and practicing, being their authentic self.
Yeah. So let's play a little bit more here, unless folks have some other thoughts, and we'll keep going.
For more, we're joined by the president of Union Theological Seminary, the Reverend Dr. Serene Jones. Her recent piece for Religion News is headlined, "What We Have to Learn from Students Leading the Charge for Justice." She's joining us in our New York studio. Welcome back to Democracy Now!, Dr. Jones. It's great to have you with us. I was just at Union Theological Seminary for the two-day retirement conference of the Columbia University Edward Said professor, Rashid Khalidi. It was supposed to be at Columbia, but it had to be moved. The president of Columbia had called in the New York police twice. Well over 100 people were arrested. The encampment was destroyed. Union has taken a very different approach, though you are affiliated with Columbia University. Can you talk about the decision you've made? And for presidents of universities and colleges and seminaries around the country, explain how your board of trustees came to this decision.
Well, thank you. And in terms of the decisions that we've made since the beginning of the war, but also increasingly since the beginning of the encampments and the student protests, is we have a long-standing policy of not allowing the police on our campus except in the case of a serious crime. And our campus, we consider it a sanctuary, a place of safety. And so rather than responding with arrest, with penalizing students, we support protesters. We support students learning what it means to find their voice and speak out for justice and freedom. So that meant in this situation, opening up our campus to all of the surrounding campuses where people were being expelled, where events weren't allowed to happen, and opening our doors. So we had Columbia classrooms meeting on our campus. We had events. Yesterday, we had the Columbia Law School do their graduation in our chapel. So it's been very active. And among those things are a Passover Seder that the students who were Jewish in the encampment asked if they could come do a Seder on our campus. We've had Muslim prayers on Friday on the campus. Our doors are wide open, which is what a school, a university should be in times like this, places for voices and places where community happens. Not a hard decision on our part.
So let's talk about that for a second. What did folks notice here? And we'll give you a second to think about that. And if folks don't have a lot to say, Tim and I can share what we noticed too. But what do folks in the room notice? Sharon says, "How lovely. Thank you so much." Yeah, Sharon, what for you was lovely about it? What for you connected? And I also see Sharon said previously, good question, Tim. DK is a concise answer, but there are other ways to do it. I'd like to explore that sometime. Yeah, and we're just sharing from the section what we noticed and waiting for some folks in the chat to say a little bit more. While we're waiting, Tim, what did you notice?
Just a real moral clarity in this time of conflict. I just really appreciate how they're aware of this is like a teaching moment, and that students should be supported in learning. Yeah, I guess she was talking about
Well, I'm hearing you say the supporting and learning, the loving accept. I see Sharon said also the loving acceptance.
Yeah,
and
in community together.
Yeah, and what I hope is the natural, loving way to go forward. As a, I really sympathize and empathize with that as an educator, because I see a big part of my role is looking to the learners and making sure everybody gets home safely, making sure everybody doesn't have a learning experience that traumatizes them and makes them less interested in learning. And
Totally.
and to take a stand against genocide and then to be abused by the police, by the institutions, I mean, really, it is quite a lot.
One thing we know about the brain is that it's hard to teach to the frontal lobe, the cognitive functioning of the brain, until or unless the conditions are set up in the space as a community. And that's why we have our agreements, right, to provide this kind of nonviolent presence where we can all show up and be our best. Because what we're doing on the sort of cognitive level is satisfying some of the lower levels first, like the lizard brain's need for safety. Like once that has been compromised, your cognitive ability goes out the door. I mean, you're giving yourself a lobotomy by just reacting to stress. You know, the fight, flight, or freeze options to stress. Those are inherent stress responses that are instinctual. And I feel like university campuses should and definitely can have the ability to calm that sense of safety, and provide that sense of safety. Any teacher can do that, and I think that's one point. And then just having.
So let me.
Thank you.
Let me pause you there for a second.
Exactly.
Yeah. So what I hear you saying here, and anybody who wants to reflect Tim back, I don't have to be the only person that does that. But what I hear you saying is that, you know, like there's the frontal lobe and there's the lizard brain, right? The amygdala. And I think somebody correct me if I'm wrong on that, but that you're pointing out that a great sense of fear takes away a higher sense of reason, and that very and in fact, actually, I would also say, right, like that very often, if workers in a workplace are afraid for their safety and security or their financial situation, they will often do desperate things that are very irrational in a workplace. So when there's a lot of fear, it doesn't give us our best chance to respond to things. And I think that's would you say that's a big part of what you're pointing out here?
Yeah, it just keeps us all from being our best self.
And actually, the Real Mystic Mask says adrenaline and cortisol. Also, previously, Sharon had said back when we were talking about the lack of support that universities are giving to their learners, right? Like she said, so sad. I used to be many years ago a bartender and server and barista as a service worker, and I remember the first day on my first waitressing job, one of my colleagues said to me, who was training me, he said, I treat every person who comes in here as a guest in my home. And I want to make sure that as a guest in my home, that I take care of them, that I look after them, and make sure they have a good time, just like any guest who comes into my home. And that's how I want you to treat people here. And so it's like, it's wild to me that educators wouldn't think that way. that educators wouldn't say, this university is a home for all of you, and that we want to welcome you on the grass and the tents, and that we want to support you. And so I really empathize with that.
Plus, when we're talking about debating issues on campus, I feel like it's all like we have to find a way to unify the heart and mind, the body and the mind connection, and speak with our intuitive, wise selves, and not just our analytical, rational selves. It can't just be a Western thing. I think it has to be an indigenous, kind of grounded, intuitive kind of connections making, a whole argument. And who's really good at that? I hope we we have time for is Mehdi Hassan.
Yes. We'll get there.
Yeah. It's a nice kind of counterpoint to,
yeah.
I think spicing up this conversation with what campuses could be. I mean, I feel like you're missing the opportunity to be more like, practice.
Yes. And hopefully tonight we actually get to we'll get a little bit of practice in tonight too. Let's take a look. We've got a couple more comments here. So Sharon says, amygdala is fear. I think the brain reacts with fight or flight, if I'm correct. Tim sounds like, BA, you've been in the greatest places. You attract that. Thank you.
Thank you.
And she says, love him. So let's take a look now. Let's take a look. We were in the Christian Amanpour interview previously, and I want to jump back a little bit to that because we were talking about this. So let's go now back to that sense of safety that he was talking about, and then we might actually we could go to the sense of safety, but maybe we should go for sense of risk first with the Mehdi Hassan and just break it up a little bit. Then we'll come back to the anti-Semitism. But this is very related. Let's. I want to share this.
I think it depends on who you're in relationship with. I mean, if you're with a bad actor who just wants to gaslight and gish gallop across you, like it doesn't really want to debate, but just shut you down, then that's a kind of a different tactic.
And Sharon says, Mehdi Hassan, and you too, of course. You too, of course. Yes. So yeah, we're gonna play. This is from. This is an episode from a show Mehdi Hassan's doing on Zeteo about comedy in the movement, and they're talking about censorship in college protests. So I'm going to play a little bit of this.
Let's talk about how we talk about Palestine.
Sure, yeah.
It threads together some of the stuff we're talking about in terms of onstage comedy, the messaging, how you feel about it, and what college students are doing.
Right.
One of the big arguments right now is the pro-Palestine side is letting itself down by allowing itself to be overrun by kind of hardcore activists who are pushing unpopular slogans. And when I was on Piers Morgan recently, he was obsessed with the word intifada.
Yeah.
You did a great bit, and I want to play this bit. You did a great bit on River to the Sea, which really upsets people.
The censorship on Israel-Palestine is pretty wild, man. Elon Musk came out on X and said anyone who uses the term from the river to the sea will be suspended on this platform. You can't say from the river to the sea. What if you're giving directions to someone on a boat? See a guy on a boat near the ocean, in a lake, like, hey, buddy, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to go from the river to the sea. Whoa! Just saying, from the river to the sea, his boat will be free. That's all I was saying. No, but you're saying once it gets out on the ocean, it's going to sink the other boats. Like, this isn't Battleship. I'm just giving directions. I want the liberation of that particular boat. That is simply what I'm saying. You know who else uses from the river to the sea? A baby salmon. Oh, yeah. All the baby salmon, they're hatched upstream, and they have to swim from the river to the sea. From the river to the sea, it is a tale of a liberation of the baby salmons.
Nobody talks about the salmons anymore.
No one talks about the salmon. See, if you just went straight with the salmon, that would just calm everyone down.
I think it would.
It would just, set the tone.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting question. Where do you stand on the kind of, there's the Ronald Reagan line that if you're explaining, you're losing. If you're having to say, well, this is what intifada means, this is what river to the sea means, then you're losing. There's the other argument that says, if you're allowing kind of white liberals to tell a anti-colonial movement, resistance movement, what language to use, that's not right either.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with both those. I agree with both those perspectives. To a degree. I mean, the first thing is like, do we have freedom of speech or do we not? Are we going to make up our minds here? Like, I understand, like, nobody wants to be called a racial slur. Like, people, we don't want hate speech proliferating to the point where people are actually feeling harmed. But at the same time, like, from the river to the sea, if you look at like the actual context of it and the history of it, you'll see that only in very few circumstances was it actually used in the way that it's being accused of being used, just like a lot of other terms have been. And so it's not really fair. I mean, specifically like intifada, for instance.
And we'll pause here for just a second, and we can explore the intifada piece too. What are folks noticing here? What are we noticing here? Feel free to share it in the chat.
The Real Mystic Mask says, even mild chronic stress causes sustained activation of the adrenal system. Wow. Yeah, it can wear you out slowly. Strengthening of the noradrenergic system, dendritic extension in the amygdala, and dendritic atrophy in the prefrontal cortex.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's cool. If you want to, feel free to share some links about that if you've got stuff that you want to share in the chat. Thanks for sharing that. Seems like you've got some knowledge about that. And Sharon, in response to this video clip, says, I've heard that River to the Sea belongs to both Israelis and Palestinians. Great comedy. Thanks. Yeah. That's an interesting point, right? Because from the river to the sea has been used to both in a positive way and in a negative way, and by Israelis as well. The Likud party, actually, that was a statement they made, I think, in the 70s, maybe. So, if I'm not mistaken. And
just like intifada, you can give it a spin in the positive or negative direction.
Well, yeah, and we'll share a little bit about that too. So, we can play the next part of this clip because there's a little bit more here we could just play. And so as we're going through this, share in the chat what you notice. Feel free to just type what you're noticing in the chat.
Yes, there's been a history of violence associated with intifada, but intifada is just a word in Arabic.
Yeah.
You're just going to ban a word in Arabic. Intifada means uprising, but it also means to shake it off.
Yeah.
So it's basically a Taylor Swift song.
Okay, so there you go.
Yeah,
that's what you got. That's what you need to turn up to Columbia.
Yeah,
and you have to have your little placards.
Yeah,
Taylor Swift.
Taylor Swift. If you look at her albums in Arabic, her song it's intifada.
She's going to be delighted when she hears this, I'm sure. It's funny though, because on a serious note, and I'm the serious guy here, intifada, the meaning is fascinating. As I pointed out to Piers Morgan last week, the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising is described on the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum's Arabic page as the Warsaw Ghetto Intifada.
There you go.
So hold on, are we saying the Jews who fought the Nazis in Poland were terrorists?
Right. Are you going to? You can't change that word.
You can't change the word. Yeah. No. But then. Okay, so here's the big question.
Yeah.
Do you believe you're changing hearts and minds from the stage with your use of rhetoric, with your ability to laugh about words like River to the Sea?
Yeah. So what are folks noticing here? Feel free to share in the chat what you noticed in this section. I want to actually bring up something that I noticed in the last section. We didn't talk much about. One of the things he said before was, do we have free speech or not? Like he was talking about that Sammy Obeid was talking about, we don't want people to be using slurs and intimidating each other, but neither do we want but we also want to be able to have free speech. And so, yeah, that was one thing I noticed. What are folks noticing else? And I wanted to share that the Real Mystic Mask also shared this article from PubMed.
Yeah, it's got some great diagrams in it. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, and Sharon had mentioned that she'd actually hoped to see more about this. So I'll just put this back up here. You can see it again, Sharon. It should be in your chat. You could scroll up for it. But again, it said even mild chronic stress causes sustained activation of the adrenal system, strengthening of the noradrenic system, dendritic extension of the amygdala, and the dendritic atrophy in the prefrontal cortex. So
there's a book called Inflamed: Deep Medicine and the Anatomy of Injustice that talks about how long-term stress and trauma is stored in the body and actually inherited across generations and accumulate and might be responsible for, I mean, this is what they wrote in the book during the pandemic, for the disproportionate negative responses of people of color. We thought originally that they were just more exposed, maybe because they were frontline or sort of in the way, but actually that their immune system was suppressed by generations of trauma handed down. And this is like research, and I don't
wow.
want to
So some of the difficult responses of folks of color actually may have been connected to their own their historical
or poverty, being run down, and scared, running scared for long periods of time can suppress the immune system.
So that their body, that they're even just poverty itself might have something to do with it too. I'm seeing the Real Mystic Mask says dendrites are signal relays in the brain.
Yeah.
So okay, so we've explored this a little bit in this way. Are there any puzzles for folks so far? Should we go back before we finish this section up a little bit? Should we go back to, I'm wondering if we want to go back to this and talk about notions of safety that he's talking about too. And again, I want to invite folks to share what you're noticing in the chat. And I want to invite folks to also share if there's any puzzles here for you. And I'm going to play this.
Sort of the key flashpoints, I think, would be around from the river to the sea, right? Palestine should be free from the river to the sea, right? Some people are interpreting that as a belief that Israel shouldn't exist. Now, under the definition, one of the definitions of anti-Semitism under the framework was denying the Jewish people their right to self-determination, e.g., by claiming that the existence of the state of Israel is a racist endeavor, right? That is one of sort of the definitions. But people who want to use that phrase, some of them say that's not what they're saying. What they're saying is they believe that Israel should be a multi-ethnic, multi-religious democracy like the United States. That was kind of the hinge upon which that congressional hearing, where some of the congressional Republicans were hammering on the presidents of a number of the universities and saying that they were insufficiently zealous about guarding against anti-Semitism and genocide. How do you think about that?
Well, first of all, that December 5th hearing was really a setup in a lot of ways, and I found it very offensive that you have members of Congress who wouldn't criticize President Trump for hosting a Holocaust denier, and wouldn't criticize him for saying immigrants are poisoning the blood of the country, now apparently care about issues like anti-Semitism. And what they set up was this claim that from the river to the sea means genocide against Jews, and are you going to stop claims for genocide against Jews? Again, speech is deplorable. You don't discipline people for it. You use the assets of the university, to go against it. And there was a poll that came out that was it 66% of Jewish students hear From the River to the Sea as genocide against Jews, and I find that phrase disturbing too. I'm a Zionist. I believe in the two-state solution, and I think some are using it to say that, precisely that there should be no right of Jews to exist in that area. However, 14% of Muslims, only 14% of Muslim students surveyed, see that as a call for getting rid of Jews or genocide. And I think that that's part of the challenge, is that people are hearing different things at the moment. And I have a colleague at Bard who was realizing that people were throwing around terms like anti-Semitism, genocide, ethnic cleansing, settler colonialism as weapons. And we're in a college. So she's put together a class. I'm actually teaching the session on anti-Semitism later this week. What do these words mean? How do we understand them? Why do people hear them differently? Those are the things that a university should do. It shouldn't say, here's a statement that's going to get you into discipline for saying, as long as it's not a true threat.
Yeah, what do folks notice? I see that Sharon saying, must work for two-state ethos, great convo from that woman. Yeah, what are folks noticing here?
So he said he was a Zionist, yeah?
Yeah, he described himself as a Zionist.
Mm-hmm.
But he also pointed out that, what was it? Was it 11 or 15% of Muslim students think river to the sea means something genocidal. And I think while at the same time, I think he said, was it 55% of Jewish folks believe that? And so what he's pointing out is that the universities are trying to discipline people for that, right? But they should be actually trying to have conversations about it, that there's this missed opportunity to talk to each other.
Yeah, discipline shuts it down versus opening it up for clarification.
Yeah, and I also remember what was being said on Mehdi Hassan just a moment ago about how it's important. On the one hand, it's important to Mehdi asks, right, and maybe I can play this clip back again. I'll play it this part one more time, where I think Mehdi was talking about like the kind of strategic overarch around this. So
I think it would.
It would just
set
the tone.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting question. Where do you stand on the kind of, there's the Ronald Reagan line that if you're explaining, you're losing. If you're having to say, well, this is what intifada means,
sure,
this is what river to the sea means, then you're losing. There's the other argument that says, if you're allowing kind of white liberals to tell a anti-colonial movement, resistance movement, what language to use, that's not right either.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with both those. I agree with both those perspectives. To a degree. I mean, the first thing is, like, do we have freedom of speech or do we not? Are we going to?
So, yeah, what are you noticing here? What are folks noticing here? Like,
what are you noticing?
Yeah, the reason why I brought this up is because Mehdi is talking about how, on the one hand, there's like the Ronald Reagan perspective, right? If you're explaining too much, that probably means that you're losing in terms of reaching the audience. And then on the other hand, though, like, if people are controlling the speech of Palestinian organizers and trying to tamper with that and not letting people find a way to speak in their own way, that's a problem too.
I would argue that if the system is complex and you try to kind of put it in a simple frame, you run the risk of confusing and damaging some of the nuances. And I could just see it happening both ways, where you might need to explain it in order to reach a point of like shared understanding so that you could have a short version that you've defined together in a kind of objective way that holds everybody's view of that definition in one place, and then a little less subjective.
So I'm hearing from you that sometimes you find explaining very valuable to a certain extent, that it allows people to kind of connect on conditions about things.
If it's inclusive, I mean.
Yeah. And it's interesting too. And I think partially it's interesting though, like, because there's also perspective that what we're also saying is like, right, like Mehdi's always thinking about debates, right? For folks that don't know, he wrote a really wonderful book called Win Every Argument, about debating. And so he's oriented towards debating. So he's thinking, I think in some sense with that, right? Like, if you're defending, then you're probably not attacking in a debate.
Exactly. Especially if you're going at the wrong framing with the negative of it, you're just digging the hole deeper as opposed to coming up with a fresh, positive way of like reframing it. Yeah.
That's a really, that kind of shows you the edges or the fringes of the picture a little bit too, I think.
We actually have footage of a debate where Mehdi, he goes around, instead of defending Hamas, he supports or maybe attacks Netanyahu's lack of care for hostages. It's a kind of a nice turn of the tables on that former IDF general, Jonathan.
Yeah, let's pull up that clip in just a second.
Oh, good. We've got some feedback from Sharon.
Yeah.
I believe there are degrees of being a Zionist without a better way of explaining that. One can feel that Jews need a safe homeland, and so do Palestinians. Yeah.
Actually, there's in the same video about From the River to the Sea by Sam Obeid, in the original TikTok of that, he actually talks about degrees of Zionism. The lowest degree, I guess we could play a clip of it really quickly. It's just a couple minutes, and then we can get to the lack of care for anyone but himself. There's
was that Netanyahu or
that I think that's being. I think that's what. Feel free to clarify, but I see. Yeah, lack.
It's a great debate, and before it gets too late, we might want to try to have a discussion or even level it up to a debate. I don't know.
Yeah, well, there's I think that would, so. Yeah, and Sharon says Netanyahu, of course. So I guess we could take a look at the debate in just a second. I want to just actually, there's kind of, so he, let's just take a look at this really quickly, because I think this is actually a nice version of explaining it too. Even if it takes a couple minutes, I think it's worthwhile.
Okay.
And then we'll go right into the debate. And after that, then, is there anybody in the audience tonight who wants to have a practice conversation or has a little speech they want to share for a minute about the what's going on in Gaza? Feel free in the chat to share if you want to have a practice conversation today. We'll also be available to do that on Sunday at 9:30 Central, 10:30 Eastern. So we don't have to have it on the show today if folks aren't ready for that. But let me play this, and then we can go to the debate, and we'll take a look at things in a second.
With that. Let's be honest. Has From the River to the Sea been used with the implication of the dissolution of Israel? Yes. But has it also been used by Israelis with the implication of the dissolution of Palestinians? Yes, it's in the Likud manifesto in the 70s. Can we be fair here? Are we just going to ban all ambiguous terms? Should we also ban I'll call you later? That's extremely ambiguous. For some people, that means I'll call you in an hour. For some, it means I'm never calling you. I've been hurt by that phrase many times. In the meantime, I'll avoid ambiguous terms. I don't even use the term Zionist. Not because I don't know what it means, which I don't, but because nobody knows what it means. Not even Zionists know what Zionist means. Ask your Jewish friends. Talk to your Jewish friends about Zionism. Sounds like an infomercial. Talk to your Jewish friends about Zionism. Well, step one, get Jewish friends, okay? And ask them how they feel about Zionism. And you'll discover that there's many different interpretations. It's like levels of a video game. There's like level 1 Zionism, which is like, I believe the Jews should have a homeland and they should be safe. And you're like, hell yeah, who would disagree with that? You'd have to be a monster to disagree with that. And then there's level 2, which is like, yeah, it should specifically be in Palestine, and they're going to have to work it out with the Palestinians. And you're like, okay, where is this going? And then there's level 3 Zionism, which is, God wants me to be here, and if you got a problem with that, say hello to my little friend. Like, whoa, I'm just trying to pick olives, man. And those are like the lower levels. The most extreme level of Zionism isn't even coming from Jewish people. It's coming from the Christians, the evangelicals. Christian Zionism, that's the wildest one. That's like the final level. That's like all Jews proceed to the Holy Land so Jesus can commence the end times. Like, whoa, what was that? Do you even like Jewish people? Why do you want the end times so bad, buddy? Evangelicals want game over. And then we should also note that there is also Jamaican Zionism for some reason. Occasionally in reggae songs, you know, Zion, blah, 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 blah. Like, okay, that's a thing too. Okay, sure, all right. My point is that nobody knows what Zionism means. But if you speak with your Jewish friends, of course there's anti-Zionist Jews as well, but if you speak with your Jewish friends, you'll find that most of them, I would say, are the first 2 levels. And if we can be understanding of that, then we should also be understanding of the fact that when most people say from the river to the sea, they just mean that Palestine will be free. That's all they mean. They're not asking for anybody to get hurt. They want the liberation of millions of people to live with freedom and self-determination. You would think we would understand this in this country.
Oh my.
Yeah, I know that's, I see a lot of comments right now, including Sharon saying lol, 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 and more lols. Too true. And the Real Mystic Mask says, exactly, they have Armageddon and Jews for Jesus go to heaven and the rest in hell. And
it's a mandate for eternal life.
Yeah, well, what'd you all notice in that clip, by the way? What did folks notice there?
I liked how he was embracing the biodiversity of the term. I mean, everybody has their own opinion of how the world should work, and there's 8 billion of us on the planet. So if you bring up a term that has a little bit of history and a little bit of complexity and ambiguity, you're going to get a lot of different opinions. And it was nice the way he differentiated the levels and then kind of like brought in these caricatures of each level. And it was very relatable. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, it's I see Sharon saying, from their perspective, covering a lot of perspectives and making people laugh.
Which de-escalates the amygdala and the nervous system so that we can maybe go on to some of the common meanings and you know, our better selves, I guess.
Yeah, I think that like when we're laughing, it is really nice when we laugh, right? That we can that a lot of times when we're laughing together, it actually gives us a chance to connect. And so if 2 people are in a hostile situation, that can be the difference that makes a difference for connection.
Sharon says laughter is great medicine.
Yeah. Now, I want to share now the clip that you've been excited about, Tim, this debate moment. And I haven't heard from anybody in the audience. If you want to share a speech or practice anything, maybe what we'll do for Tim, how do you feel about this? For the rest of the evening, we could look at the debate, the Mehdi Hassan debate, a little bit, and then maybe go to my C-SPAN clip a little bit and talk about that. And if folks still want to practice a conversation or give a little speech or something on the show, you still can. But does that seem like a good kind of pathway to the end?
Yeah, I like that because like Mehdi Hassan is demonstrating some nice techniques, and then I think you're exemplifying in a kind of more personal way, but you still bring those techniques into it. So it's a kind of a nice pairing. I don't know if you meant to do that, but
thank you.
Sounds good.
I appreciate the comparison. Thank you. Yeah, I like what Sharon's saying. Laughter is healing physically and cosmically and connection.
Yeah.
And she says both are great options. All right, yeah, let's take a look at this. So this was a debate on CNN between a former Israeli Defense Forces spokesperson and Mehdi Hassan. I'm going to start with the beginning of it. At any time, if you want me to pause, feel free to say so in the chat, and I'd be glad to pause, and feel free to share what we notice. And I might pause a few times before that too.
Thank you.
I was a senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies and the former IDF spokesperson, retired Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conducive, also with us, the editor-in-chief and CEO of Zateo, Mehdi Hassan. Mehdi, I know you have an exclusive report about a letter that Republican senators sent to the International Criminal Court. We will get to that in just a few minutes, but I want to ask you about this reporting about Hamas saying publicly they've agreed to a ceasefire deal, but it's really kind of a counterproposal that they have that includes elements they know Israel never agreed to. So was this some kind of propaganda effort by Hamas to say, we're at the table, we're agreeing to something?
Well, look, the reporting we have says that, yes, it was an Egyptian Qatari proposal that the Americans were involved in too, Abby. The CIA director, Bill Burns, has been involved in this. The Israelis apparently were on board until, of course, Hamas agreed. And then the Israelis' bluff was called. And now they're saying, well, we don't agree to this proposal because we want to free the hostages, even though the proposal would help free the hostages.
Can I just pause you there for a second?
The Israeli newspaper.
I just want to add one bit of information I think is critical here. The part that Israel didn't agree to is the part that calls for a permanent end to the war. And I think this is really what is at issue here, that Israel has never agreed to that, and that maybe this is a counterproposal, but that means essentially that everybody has to get back to the table and agree to what is on the table now.
Yeah, but let me just say, in what world is Hamas going to say, we're going to release all the hostages and you carry on killing us? Obviously, outside world, America, Western countries has been wanting a ceasefire for a while. We were told Hamas was the obstacle, and now they're calling Israel's bluff. The reality is, Abby, that the obstacle to a hostage deal has always been Benjamin Netanyahu, and those are not my words. Those are the words of Chaim Rubenstein, the former spokesperson for the hostages family, who told the Israeli press last week that Netanyahu's been the obstacle. He says that they found out there was a deal on the table back on October 9th, 10th. To get hostages released, but Netanyahu hid it from them. Those are the words of the spokesperson for the Israeli families of the hostages. And he hid it from them because he knows that if he agrees to a hostage deal, his fascist colleagues in his coalition government will collapse his government. This is Israeli domestic politics.
Lieutenant Colonel, what about that? I mean, if the hostages are all released, shouldn't Israel seriously consider ending hostilities in Gaza and allowing for a political settlement that leads to the future?
Yeah, I'm listening to the second edition of Mehdi Hassan's monologue that I saw earlier, and it's not surprising that you're parroting Hamas talking points. Let's put things here in perspective. We have a terrorist organization that abducted civilians and soldiers. They're the ones for the last 4 months have been refusing any deal that Israel, the US, Qatar, Egypt and others have put forward. And now, when push comes to shove and when they see Israeli tanks lined up on their way to Rafah, all of a sudden they are agreeing. They're agreeing to something that wasn't on the table. And it's quite absurd that this is even how it's covered. And it's classic deception 101 by an organization that is very savvy in deception and unfortunately has figureheads and mouthpieces all over Western media doing their work, whether it's Al Jazeera or other places, and getting that message out that Israel is the problem when Israeli civilians and soldiers are the ones that have been abducted.
I'll let Betty respond to that.
So I think all of your viewers saw me quote the spokesperson for the Israeli hostages' families. And the colonel then said, I'm parroting Hamas talking points. He's referring to the hostages' families as Hamas, as parroting Hamas talking points, because I quoted them. I didn't quote Hamas. In fact, tonight, the colonel knows that hundreds of people went to Netanyahu's house and screamed, you have blood on your hands, Israeli protesters. I guess they're all Hamas, right? The Israeli position now is anyone who disagrees with them is Hamas. I'm guessing tomorrow they'll say CIA Director Bill Burns, who was involved in this hostage negotiation deal, he's Hamas too. Everyone's Hamas. And as for deception, I mean, come on. The colonel was a spokesperson for the IDF, which has spent the last 6 months lying. Abby, your network has debunked multiple lies that the Israeli military has told. CNN's Jeremy Diamond, I urge all your viewers to go and watch your colleague Jeremy Diamond's report on 10 kids killed in the Al-Maghazi refugee camp last month. The Israelis said we had nothing to do with it. And yet Jeremy interviewed 3 munitions experts who looked at the evidence and said, yeah, Israel killed those 10 kids. So when we talk about deception, we're learning from the masters here.
Yeah. What are folks noticing here? I see Sharon saying, this man's speech is so gaslighting, euphemisms. Mehdi is so refreshingly honest and accurate. Yeah, what would be an example of Mehdi's honesty and accuracy?
It'd be good if we had a first source for Hein Rubenstein, the spokesperson of the Israeli hostage families. If he had some kind of like,
yeah, there is a primary source for Hein Rubenstein because
perfect.
There's actually been a number of articles. I think we've got some in our notes actually too. Yeah, there's because he's the there's like an organization for the hostages that he's the spokesperson of. Let's see if I can pull something up.
I also
yeah, go ahead.
Just sensing a pattern here when Israel spokespeople claim the mantle of victimhood and say that we've been attacked, or I think in Jonathan's words, he's defending Israel because he says people say Israel is the problem, but Israel has been abducted. So it's like claiming the victimhood, mantle of victimhood, as the whole thing has been, oh, we're just defending ourselves, when the opposite seems to be true. If you just back up to before October 7th and look at like who had hostages on, and before all that, and what were the death tolls in the conflict? How would you compare the death tolls? Was it even a real conflict, and when did that start? And yeah, I just feel like there's just a lot of saying one thing while they're doing the exact mirror opposite. like we're the victims when they're actually the oppressors because of the apartheid state and all these other
right, like it's wild, right? Noticing that Jonathan says that Hein Rubenstein is Hamas, that that like, and Mehdi points that out, right? That like, wait, so you're saying the hostages' families are Hamas now? And Sharon says, people going to Netanyahu's house, if I remember correctly, we know thousands of Israeli people in the streets calling for Yahu's resignation. And yeah, I think that's another example, because I think he was saying that some of them were the families. Let's see. Let me see. I have to sign into the Washington Post to show you all this. One sec. But yeah, there's sources for the protesters going to Netanyahu's house, for sure. I'm pulling that up right now. What else are folks noticing?
Sharon says that Israeli asymmetry is criminal and tragically immoral. Yeah, I feel like they're like at the top of their game in this controlling the narrative that the empire managers have been practicing and perfecting for centuries.
Yeah.
Like while they're hostily conquering frontier territories around the world, they're claiming of how they need to do it to improve the world and spread their Christianity, and that people are uncivilized and they need help. And yeah, it's just so crazy to see the asymmetry.
Yeah. So I'm hearing you both say that the asymmetry of the Israeli and Palestinian conditions are very jarring, and I see that
Choppy gallbladder.
Yeah.
Gallbladders.
Yeah. Anyhow, Sharon says, and their weaponry is exponentially greater than any Palestinians. To what we're talking about with the asymmetry. Do we want to read a little bit of this article in the Washington Post?
Oh, yeah.
Do you want to start with the first paragraph and I'll take the next one?
Yeah. Let me make full screen so I can read here. Tens of thousands of demonstrators flooded Israel's streets for a second straight night Sunday, calling for immediate elections and for the government to urgently negotiate the release of more than 100 hostages still held by Hamas in Gaza.
The twin demands represented a merging of two distinct protest movements, one including the families of hostages and the other led by civil society and political opposition, which could become the greatest threat yet to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his far-right government. And so what are folks noticing here? And previously I noticed Sharon said heartbreaking and jarring.
He's like trying to get out of elections by keeping the conflict alive.
Trying to get out of elections by keeping the conflict alive? What other things do you notice here? Like, for instance, I notice that the hostages want immediate elections and for the government to urgently negotiate the release of more than 100 hostages still held by Hamas in Gaza.
Like if he really wanted to help hostages, maybe he could negotiate. When was this? Was this like in the heat of the moment, right afterwards?
No, this is recently. Okay. This is actually fairly recently. This was written March 31st.
Okay.
And also Sharon points out, and out of his corruption charges, right? Because he's currently under investigation for corruption. And so if he didn't have a war going on, he could go to prison. Now, so we have this. Should we watch a little bit more of the debate?
Sure.
Let's take a little bit more of a look at the debate.
Thanks.
Oh, whoops. Sorry about that.
Israeli said we had nothing to do with it. And yet Jeremy interviewed 3 munitions experts who looked at the evidence and said, yeah, Israel killed those, nothing to do with it. And yet Jeremy interviewed 3 munitions experts who looked at the evidence and said, yeah, Israel killed those 10 kids. So when we talk about deception, we're learning from the masters here.
Look, Lieutenant Colonel, the hostage families are urging the government at this point to come forward and release the hostages as part of some kind of deal. One of the things that the families have said is that they feel like they are being abandoned. How do you respond to that, given that there are opportunities, it seems, to take a deal that would stop the fighting in exchange for getting their loved ones home? Lieutenant Colonel, I'm not sure you could hear me. Can you hear me now? I think we're going to try to get him back. But Mehdi, I do want to get back to one other aspect of this, which is...
Yeah, what are folks noticing now? And I see Sharon was saying previously, I thought he was convicted and appealing, and also appealing by jimmying the Supreme Court. Yeah. Yeah, so what were folks noticing from that section?
I forget what event or what massacre Mehdi was talking about, but he did seem to want to talk about how there's terrorism on both sides, or attacks that Hamas might be responding to, maybe. I'm not sure exactly what context that was.
Oh, and Sharon said, we lost Mehdi. Oh no, Sharon, that's an interesting point, because it's more, if you look back here, let's just take a look at this for a second. And I hear you, Tim, saying that there was that other piece from CNN that they were investigating as well. And I would have liked to hear more about that too. But yeah, Sharon was saying something about someone not being available. And so if we play this
as part of some kind of deal, one of the things that the families have said is that they feel like they are being abandoned. How do you respond to that, given that there are opportunities, it seems, to take a deal that would stop the fighting in exchange for getting their loved ones home? Lieutenant Colonel, I'm not sure you could hear me. Can you hear me now? I think we're going to try to get him back. But Mehdi, I do want to get back to one other aspect of this, which is...
So yeah, so as folks are seeing that, what do you notice? Was it because Sharon said we lost Mehdi, but I noticed that Jonathan, the spokesperson, Sharon says, oh, I see. Yeah, Sharon, do you want to say a little more about that?
We lost Jonathan.
Yeah.
I think he does come back, and
yeah, no, he does. It's interesting that he disappears at that moment, just as he's being confronted over this fact that he's denouncing the hostages' families. Yeah, and it looked like his picture froze, it's funny because at first some weird stuff happens, and then he disappears all of a sudden. So that was kind of interesting.
Is that part of his debate technique?
I mean, it is interesting that the place where he had the worst argument, he goes off camera, right? That is very fascinating to me. I'm not going to pretend I know what's happening. Should I play a little bit more? I want to check in with folks. We could play a little more of this debate, which I think is just so great, and it gets even spicier as we go on. So maybe let's just let it roll for a little bit, and then we'll see if we have time for my C-SPAN thing or not. Not a big deal if we don't. Let's take a look at this.
Is from Israel's perspective, they want to make sure that Hamas is not in a position to ever attack them again. And I think you would agree that that's a reasonable position for them to have. So hostages all being returned, if they say that's not enough, I mean, Hamas, it seems like, shouldn't be in a position to be dictating the terms of their own surrender in a war that they started.
So it's a good question, Abby, and it's a reasonable goal. Of course it is. But if you don't want Hamas to be in a position to attack you again, maybe you shouldn't energize and embolden Hamas. This entire conflict has turned Palestinians in the entire region against Israel. It's made Israelis less safe, not more safe. It's obviously killed tens of thousands of Palestinians. And Israel has a right to say, okay, we don't want to be attacked again, but at what cost? 34,000 Palestinians dead, tens of thousands more under the rubble, 14,500 children dead, 1.2 million people hiding out in Rafah and now being told to move, to be relocated, 600,000 children. Abby, UNICEF say you cannot move 600,000 children, many of whom are sick, wounded, malnourished. They say it'll be a catastrophe. There is no safe zone to go to. It's the most Orwellian phrase that Israeli spokespersons use. There is nowhere safe in Gaza. So of course, Israel wants to reasonably not be attacked again. But doing this doesn't work, and it's morally unsustainable.
Looks like we have Jonathan Conriquez back. Lieutenant Colonel, I do want to talk about this Rafah invasion that seems to be on the horizon here. Our colleague Barak Ravid.
Yeah, I'm noticing Sharon says, but their approach is not reasonable. New generations of Hamas have been created. And I think that's in relation to noticing that as they supposedly destroy Hamas, it seems for every time they destroy them, more of Hamas is created. And I think that's what Sharon's saying when she says, but their approach is not reasonable. New generations of Hamas have been created. Should I play a little bit more now?
Yeah.
Let's watch a little more.
And I do just want to be aware of the time.
Yeah. Let's think about that for a second. Yeah, so we could maybe wind down after this a little bit. I think that would be nice. I mean, I'm glad to keep going a little bit longer.
A good wind down might include where we've been, what we've learned, and how we can take this forward, maybe either for next time or in our conversations with family and friends and stuff like that.
I think that would be a great idea, actually. Let's do that. So we'll watch a little bit more of this debate, and then we'll wrap it up. And Sharon says, the woman said it was rational to want Hamas to exist. Are you saying it was that she said it was rational that Hamas might exist because of the circumstances? Let's play a little more.
That sources tell him that Israeli forces are going to take over the Palestinian side of the Rafah crossing between Egypt and Gaza. We're already seeing what seems like bombs falling there tonight. Why is Israel doing this when they know that there is no safe place, as Mehdi was saying, for civilians to go? And Rafah is the place that initially the Israeli government told them to go.
Yeah, I would take everything that my respected colleague to the panel here says with a lot of pinches of salt. Lots of untruths were said when I was on air and off air, and I won't give them credibility by repeating them. What I'll say is this. Rafah is a place where Hamas and UNRWA has told people to go. The sad reality in Gaza is that Hamas uses these civilians as human shields and doesn't leave Israel with any other option but to ask people to leave. Now, Israel is doing that out of concern for human life and their safety.
Lieutenant Colonel, I have to stop you there because the IDF told Gazan civilians to move to the south. Rafah was the only safe place,
Correct.
Supposedly safe place for them to go. So this is not about UNRWA. This is actually where they are going because the rest of the country is in rubble. So where are they supposed to go now?
Right. So there are various locations in Gaza, a few miles northeast of Rafah and northwest of Rafah, close to Khan Yunis, where they can go, and hopefully they will go. And I agree. I take the point that it is a harsh environment and not an ideal environment for anybody to live in. I wouldn't want to be there, to be frank. But the sad reality is that the responsibility for this situation lies on Hamas's shoulders. And I think that if we detach ourselves from agendas and ideas and Israel hatred, and if we look at the situation from a, let's say, a more clean perspective, what choice does Israel have? What choice does Israel have in order to defend its civilians in their homes? If Hamas is allowed to continue to exist, to store weapons, and to prepare for the next attack, then it is only a matter of time before these attacks will come. And those are not my words, Mehdi. Those are the words of Hamas leaders who say that we will do October 7 again and again until we reach Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. And I don't think that Israel should allow that to happen. And if it means, sadly, moving people around before combat starts and making sure that they are safer, not safe, but safer, away from harm's way, by telegraphing Israeli intentions, then I think that is a very humane thing to do. Hamas, sadly, must be defeated.
We do. I do need to move on, but I just want to say one thing. I mean, this is not a question of hating Israel. It's a question of the reality on the ground, which is that there is already a humanitarian catastrophe unfolding in Gaza, and there's no question that trying to move over 1 million people in short period of times is not going to be something that is feasible. But Mehdi, I have to get to your reporting, and I do want to talk.
Proven wrong.
I do want to talk.
I don't agree, and that has been proven wrong.
You don't agree that there's a humanitarian catastrophe occurring right now in Gaza?
No, I don't agree that it cannot be done, because
I didn't say that
the same lines that were told. These were the same things that were told to Israel before Israel started its invasion of Gaza City. And believe me, I answered that question hundreds, if not thousands of times. And it was alleged that this was tantamount to war crime, that we were asking people to move, when in fact it was possible. 900,000 out of 1.1 million people did eventually move, and it saved a lot of people's lives. And I think that should be acknowledged. And the same talking points are being repeated now by the same Hamas mouthpieces.
Mehdi, you could respond.
Please go ahead.
So NBC News reported last month, Abby, that 7 different airstrikes from Israel took place in what were designated as safe zones by Israel. Palestinians were told to go to safe zones by Israel and then killed in those safe zones by Israel. That's reporting from NBC News, but I'm sure the colonel would say they're Hamas as well. Everyone who disagrees with the colonel is Hamas. And by the way, he's quoting a Hamas spokesman. None of us like Hamas, but let's quote someone on his side, the Likud party international vice chairman, Netanyahu's party. He said a couple of days ago, the Likud party vice chair, Colonel, you can respond to this quote. The Likud party vice chair, international vice chair, said on Israeli TV a couple of days ago, there are no uninvolved civilians in Rafah. No, there are no innocent people in Rafah, 1.2 million. No innocent people, and we should go in, these are his words, and kill and kill and kill. Sounds pretty genocidal to me, Colonel. Do you agree with that?
I agree that those are comments that are horrible and shouldn't be thought and shouldn't be said. And I'm happy that I don't have to explain the Likud party or whoever that is that you're sourcing, and I haven't heard the quote. But I can tell you what the chief of staff, the guy that is responsible for the use of force in Gaza, and he speaks relentlessly about not killing civilians, and he gives orders not to kill civilians.
Well,
And he
you're not
gives
doing a
orders
very
and
good
directives
job of
to
it,
the
are
troops
you?
on the ground
14,000 dead kids.
to apply distinction and to apply proportionality. And speaking about safe zones, yesterday 4 soldiers were killed when mortars were fired from Rafah, from a safe zone, at Israeli soldiers. And I'm sure that wouldn't bother you too much that 4 soldiers are killed, but they were killed, fired from a safe zone in Rafah. Happened yesterday. I don't have an MSNBC report to quote it, but it happened nevertheless.
All right, guys, I have to leave it there. Mehdi, you have some really important reporting about a letter from Republican lawmakers.
So yeah, let's hola, Maple.
Hi, Maple. Welcome.
Yeah. So we've been watching this debate. We're getting ready to wind down a little bit, but glad to see you here, Maple. Yeah, thank you. So what did folks notice in this clip so far that we saw? What did folks notice? Feel free to share in the chat.
It's like they're having 2 different experiences, like they're each living in 2 different realities.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, it feels like that, right? But then there's that moment that was kind of interesting where Mehdi quoted the Likud, what was it, the vice chair of what? And you can see the video. I've watched it in Hebrew, where he says there's no innocent people in there's no innocent people, he says, in Gaza, and he says we need to kill, 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 kill. He keeps saying that, and it's that. And at that point, Jonathan cannot defend that. At that point, he has to basically say, I'm not sure whether this was said or not, but I'm not going to say that that's a thing that anybody should ever be saying. Of course, we all know that that was said, but somebody wants to put the link for that in the chat. They certainly could. And Maple says, Zios, short for Zionists, dominate and interrupt always. And Sharon says, sadly so, about the Likud party, I think. 3-year-olds are innocent by definition. So, was there anything else we noticed from this clip?
I've been following as much as I can, the headlines, but also the backstories and the history, working here with a learning community and yourself. And it just baffles me that even when you're paying attention, like I'm trying to, just because what we're seeing in social media is so different than what we're seeing in mainstream media. So you're like already aware of how the narrative is being kept down from us. That when you do see a narrative and it's so like disjointed like that, where they're talking over each other with just these really polarizing differences of opinions, it must be really confusing for most people who are not paying attention. Even when I'm trying to pay attention, I still feel like my foundation has been taken away when I'm being pulled in 2 completely opposite directions, and I don't have the first sources, and it's going to take me an hour or 2 to backtrack, everybody's, what they're referring to. This is just really hard to play along. It's all happening way over there, and we're getting misinformation and disinformation. It's like, what are we supposed to do?
Yeah, it can be like, I think a lot of times, so I'm hearing you say that having these different perspectives and like not being sure which one and not having the time to look them up, very often it creates a kind of what is it that Hamlet says? Conscience does make cowards of us all. Of course, he means consciousness, right? But this notion that we become indecisive through these different things. And I see some comments here, by the way, that I just want to share very quickly. I see Maple had said, this is about the dehumanization of Palestinians, like Vietnamese, or this word GOKS.
Gooks?
Yeah. Dehumanize those you want to kill, then steal land from. And then Maple also says from Israel on October 8th, Palestinians are animals. Yeah, and there was also, I think, was it Ben Gvir or was it Smotrich who said Nakba 2.0? And then Sharon says, and look at the condition of Gaza. Can't deny all the horrors, death, and destruction. My eyes tell me the hugeness of the situation, no matter what some people may say.
Yeah, it kind of speaks for itself. Then
yeah,
what comes in the form of video and footage and first sources. Gook. Gotcha.
So it's we've been working on this. Are there any puzzles for folks tonight as we're coming to reflect on what we've been learning about tonight? I'm going to take down the puzzles that people mention.
Why is the Mehdi Hassan a good example of a debate tactic? Because we've talked about this before while we were going to use it, but I forgot what you said, or something about like some of the examples that we were seeing right now about focusing on Netanyahu's intentionality around saving hostages or not, and calling that bluff.
Yeah.
Something about avoiding the language of the other guy, right? You don't want to just leave yourself in a hole.
So I'm hearing you say it might be avoiding the language of the other person. That's what's helpful in the tactic. I think what I meant by that was more that very often in these debates, like for instance, a lot of folks see debates where folks, going back to that point that Mehdi Hassan was making about Ronald Reagan, that if you're explaining yourself, you're probably losing, right? That's to say that if on the debate you're on the defensive, then you're probably losing. Now, in this case, Jonathan was making such a gish gallop that Mehdi would sit and wait and then point out something like, you're saying everybody's Hamas. Anybody could be Hamas at this, and so what he does, it's like in Euclid's Elements, there's the proof called the reductio ad absurdum, which is proof by absurdity, that you take an example and you show how the example becomes impossible. You can see Mehdi picking that out of there at different times too. I think that's very powerful. Sharon says he comes with facts so clearly.
So, yeah, you get a sense that he's prepared and
there was that moment where basically they were pointing out, right, that that morally, right, that the hostages' families were expressing a lot about ceasefire, and and about thanks, Sharon. They were talking about, I think there was this part. Well, let's just play the clip back really quickly. Because
I just want to say, wouldn't it be good if the encampment students could sort of learn from some of these examples, and like back to what the Union Theological Seminary president was saying about this is the place where students should learn how to debate and free speech and try out different opinions.
Yeah. Yeah, in fact, let's circle into that in a second. That it's this notion of being able to have like a discourse and practicing at that. I'll share this clip one last time, because I think this is kind of a moment that's very telling here, and then we can
look. Lieutenant Colonel, the hostage families are urging the government at this point to come forward and release the hostages as part of some kind of deal. One of the things that the families have said is that they feel like they are being abandoned. How do you respond to that, given that there are opportunities, it seems, to take a deal that would stop the fighting in exchange for getting their loved ones home? Lieutenant Colonel, I'm not sure you could hear me. Can you hear me now? I think we're going to try to get him back. But Mehdi, I do want to get back.
Now, I think that was kind of interesting too, because one thing I noticed in this clip as well is that was a point that Mehdi had actually made earlier, and the woman who was conducting the interview didn't want to let that go unanswered. And so in some ways, Mehdi's being less active here because he's set the situation up so well that now everybody in the room wants to know the answer. He's made a real problem for Jonathan, who doesn't want to fight against the hostages' families, right? Like every time he has to explain against the hostages' families, his moral depravity is more and more obvious.
So instead of it being about debating the legitimacy of Hamas, Mehdi is focused on protecting the hostages.
Yeah, and so I came off there for a second. I'm sorry about that. So I missed the first part of what you were saying a little bit. But I heard you say that he was defending the legitimacy of the hostages' families in this point against them.
It wasn't so much about Hamas. Mehdi was going around that argument and focusing on the hostages.
Yeah, and Sharon says, we live in a dangerous time where ideas are being shepherded to, on point of view, a terrible experience for colleges. Yeah. So are there any other, I want to keep talking about this, but I also want to say, are there any other puzzles for folks? And feel free to share them in the chat if you'd like. I want to just take a moment because as we're closing out, what are the things that folks were there things that folks were still hoping get done tonight? Like on Sunday, we're going to have the Human Rights Literacy Group over Zoom. I'll paste the meetup link here again because the event will be on Sunday, 9:30 Central, 10:30 Eastern, and you can join that event and practice having a conversation, practice debating with us. Is there anything else from you, Tim, that you're thinking of?
Yeah, this is one of those times when I just feel very grateful that people are showing up to do this work together, and it feels very just therapeutic in the sense that it's so hard to pay attention to what's going on over there by yourself, and feeling that sense of isolation and all of the amygdala stress reactions and feeling so helpless. So yeah, it's just thank you for creating the space, and it's just been really great working with the content and trying to share it with people. And yeah, I really look forward to keep practicing and getting better at this, even though it feels so far away and so remote. We are able to focus on some of the educational parts and the growing parts, and I feel like there's a lot of potential to put an end to this endless war if we can just win this debate.
That's right.
If we can just create the world that we want to live in through nonviolent, healthy conflict resolution, that's the greatest gift that we can push back with, right?
Yeah, it's a very powerful thing, the power of nonviolence. A lot of people don't think it is, but because it's so unthreatening in certain ways, it means that a lot more people can join more effortlessly. And that's a very powerful force. And if we all connect together and listen to each other, we actually have a chance at making a real profound difference, I think. And I'm grateful too, Tim, for tonight. I felt, like on many of these nights, I felt like we've done this and it's been harder, right? Like look how much content and learning we went through tonight, and how disciplined we were, and how much we listened to each other, and how many people commented and shared what they noticed as we went through this tonight. If folks want to share in the chat things that you learned tonight that were interesting, feel free to share them in the chat. On Thursday also, on Thursday too, there's going to be a coding lab. So if you want to make a web page, if you want to learn how to make a web page or an app or a database, feel free to join for that. And
Sharon's fading, and
Maple says, MLK questioned nonviolence after a while. Getting heads bashed in is maybe not the best way. Are you sure about that? I'd like to check a source about that. I'm not so sure about that. There was a period of his life where he actually early on questioned nonviolence more and carried a gun with him regularly. But he actually ended up, I think, letting go of that eventually. But a lot of people question nonviolence different times. For instance, Cesar Chavez in the United Farm Workers, they're originally absolutely committed to nonviolence. And when they hit rock bottom at one point, they did have one meeting where they considered sabotage, I think. But then they canceled it. Now this is a whole other conversation that we could get into about nonviolence, truly. And Sharon says, feel helpless to affect anything at this point. Madmen are doing violence in the face of worldwide condemnation. Well, yeah. So it's an interesting point, right? Because people are like, there's a sense like, okay, well, wait, you mean like being nonviolent, is that going to just let things go on? But like, if you look at it like Maria, Maria Stepien and Erica Chenoweth, Why Civil Resistance Works. This massive study reviews nonviolent and violent direct action. It shows nonviolent direct action is twice as likely to succeed as violent direct action, largely because if you're going to do violent direct action, you have to recruit people and you have to get them willing to take a risk, like commit a crime together with you in order to join in. So it's much harder to recruit. And also in the history of nonviolent versus violent direct action, nonviolent direct action is twice as likely to lead to more democracy, whereas violent direct action is more likely to lead to autocracy. It doesn't mean it always does, but that's just the case. And I know it can feel frustrating. I personally feel very strongly, and we can talk about this more, that we're not actually challenging people nonviolently as strongly as we can. We call people out and we condemn them, but we don't call their bluff. We don't challenge them morally in an intimate enough way to call their bluff. And so personally, I believe in that strategy, and I've seen it work.
Can I just add on to that? C-SPAN, Washington Journal, every day from 7:30, 8 a.m. to 9:30, sometimes 10, is an opportunity to practice calling in to the show and challenging the guest speakers that are on the show. It is a lot of fun and really great practice. And even if you can't get on, if your call doesn't go through, you can jump on Twitter and send C-SPAN, Washington Journal, and the guest, if they have a Twitter handle, your comments. And so it's something that I have been not very good at, but I'm learning by just listening and watching others do it and practicing. And we can take those practice events, if they turn out to be learning and teaching opportunities, we can bring them back on the show and break them down like we started to do tonight. And we've got more work to do on that, but I would just invite everybody who is up and is wanting to practice this work is something we can do together. It's called flock fishing. You can be on that.
Yeah.
Added to the Signal channel, and BA is really a great host in terms of like you're always sharing what's up for tomorrow, what's coming up, who the guest speakers are, and sometimes we get into just these very conversations, but in a public way, so to speak.
Yeah. So feel free to let us know if you'd like to. If you'd like us to add you to the Signal group for calling in on C-SPAN. And it is a great way to practice. Next time we can take a look at some of the speeches folks are making, including mine. I want to also, Maple brought up one little point. Gandhi looked good compared to the other group there that blew up an empty building, so they gave it to Gandhi. Would they have the other group to not use a little bomb? Actually, there's a really great example for this with the suffragettes. I don't know, Maple, if you're familiar with the campaigns between the British suffragettes and the American suffragettes, but many of the people who were suffragettes in both those campaigns were involved in both of them at different times. I can get the data for you if you want, but I believe a lot of the strategies were actually the same, and except the British suffragettes used a lot more violence than the American ones did. The American ones came a little bit later, just ever so slightly later. And I believe there was the violent ones in Britain, it took many more years than it did in the States. The States actually got, using the same kinds of tactics, except for the violence, an achievement much faster. So I don't, and also it's worth noting, well, the Brits used harder tactics, but it took them actually longer, is what I'm saying. Is that they won, but it actually took them longer than the Americans, and the Americans used nonviolence. So, like the data is more on the side of nonviolence, from what I've seen, and. But anyhow, we're winding up now, and yeah, there's if you want to see also, I suppose, if you want to see the speech I made, I'll just share this with the group in the chat. Yeah, but there's going to be, so yeah, we'll be meeting on Thursday for coding, at 7 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Eastern. The link is in the chat. And also, if you want to see the video of my call into C-SPAN, which is just so everybody knows, that's not the official position of Code Whatever. I don't want to pretend like I am Code Whatever, because I'm not. But it's something that we're going to want to explore together in this space. Is there anything else? On Sunday, again, there's at 9:30 a.m., 10:30 Eastern, 9:30 Central. There's also going to be another human rights literacy group. And you can come there and practice having these difficult conversations. And Sharon says, read Erica Chenoweth's book about nonviolence. Erica Chenoweth started as a violent person, like she didn't think nonviolence worked. She's ex-military. And now she's one of the leading people about it because she read the history of it. And she did a study about it with Maria Stepien. So this is, I think that's about it for everyone. Thank you so much. Also, if you get a chance, feel free to stop by our website. We are a very, very modest 501c3, and we have one staff member. I'm not her, I'm not them. I volunteer here, but we'd love it if you're able to share and donate. Our website is codewhatever.us, and all donations are tax deductible in the United States. And thank you. Yeah, go ahead, Tim.
You mentioned what Code Whatever doesn't want to be, like a singular voice. But what could you say, like what it does aspire to in terms of nonprofit?
That's a beautiful point. So we nurture 21st century literacy and human rights, and we'd also like to be a people's think tank, not a top-down hierarchical think tank. So what we want is everybody to share what we really think as a group, and that means some of us will be facilitating sometimes and trying to help hold things together, but we're also going to be sharing what we think, even though we don't expect any of us to have to agree with each other necessarily, though we do hope that we reach a good consensus about what it means to support human rights. And so
thank you.
Yeah, and we also have computer programming classes every week, as well as human rights literacy. I see Maple says, Chenoweth said 3.5% lobby hard gets it, but in these days, Rome, corruption, and non-balanced government. I think it has to be 3.5%, right, that are willing to non-violently get arrested. And Sharon says, love that too. And yeah, so the 3.5 is a lot of people who don't seem to be able to come out. Well, and this is a big part, Maple, this is a big part of my point. My point is that a lot, like for instance, you see this very clearly in Ferguson. When people started getting into the more violent stuff, the police had been violent, and that wasn't a huge deterrent. But when whether it was infiltrators or whoever started getting more violent, that's when the masses didn't want to be involved, right? And a lot of people backed out at that point. Very often, when you have like violent direct action in a situation, it can have a real chilling effect. It's a lot harder to recruit with, and I think that's where I think it gets tricky. Let's keep having. We're going to keep having this conversation, though. This isn't the end. Thank you so much for joining Tim and I tonight. Thank you, Tim. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you all, and thank you for being so much.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Yeah, this was really good. I think this is one of my favorite sessions so far. Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, David. Thank you to Maple and Owen and all the people who came here tonight. We really treasure your participation and the joy you bring us. And we'll be back doing this probably in about 2 weeks. So we'll see you all then. Thanks again, everyone. This was just a lovely night. So really glad to have you here.